Hey Peter, thanks for coming on my show. How are you doing?
Just nursing whatever I got. I don't know. I had a lot of tests and they all came out negative, so I guess that's good, but it's also a little bad because I don't really know, what I got. But hopefully it's going away.
Yeah, that's all right. We can hear you just fine. So, one of my favorite stories from our documentaries that we did together, The Housing Bubble, The Fall of 2008, and The Bigger Bubble that's going to be coming out, is the premiere of The Housing Bubble was back in 2018. And we had actually shot our interview all the way back in May of 2011. And so, one of my favorite stories is you were on a panel at Freedom Fest during the Anthem Film Festival, and you came and sat down to watch this documentary, The Housing Bubble. And as it's starting, you're thinking, man, why didn't they interview me for this project? I would have been the perfect fit having predicted the housing crash. And then you got to watch my movie with yourself in it. So that was quite the
Because
experience.
I probably didn't remember it was the same one.
Well, yeah, I mean, 7 years later, well, you wouldn't be expecting that film to finally get done, but it did. But anyway, with my podcast, what we're going to talk about is more like you are somebody that really stands out as somebody that, regardless of popular opinion, you stuck to your guns and stuck to your principles and said what you really believed. And so I really want to just kind of explore that a little bit and get to know you a little bit. And so we'll start with your dad. I actually have his book right here about inflation.
Did I sign that one?
Yeah, yes, you did. Yes, I appreciate that. And I was just wondering, not just the education your dad gave you, obviously, as somebody that has been a huge advocate against inflation, but the principles he instilled in you. Can you talk a little bit about your dad and what it was like for you and Andrew growing up with him?
Yeah, well, he was very dedicated to what he believed in, and he believed very passionately in it. I think he was a real American. He was a patriot. Unfortunately, he died as a political prisoner. But he really tried to, expose the corruption in government, not just in the federal government, but in the court system, and really was an advocate for the Constitution, individual liberty, and the principles that the country was founded on. He was also very smart when it came to economics, really well schooled, self-taught. Not he went to college, but he didn't learn Austrian economics at UConn where he went to college. He kind of learned it on his own, and he testified in 1968. They had hearings on whether or not they should remove gold backing from the dollar. They ultimately didn't do it until 1971, but the law that authorized the president to do it was passed earlier while Johnson was president. And my father testified, and his testimony he reproduced in his book, The Biggest Con, which people can still get copies of. I mean, used. There's not that many new ones around. But his testimony is the only one that stood up because gold was $35 an ounce at the time, and the chairman of the Federal Reserve and the Secretary of the Treasury testified that the price of gold would go down if they removed backing. They said that the dollar was supporting gold, and without the dollar propping up gold, gold would be worth less than $35 an ounce. And my father said no, the gold price will go way up, but he also predicted all of the inflation of the 1970s. And the other experts said no, there won't. They didn't see the inflation coming at all. So he understood economics, understood law, the Constitution, and he really did a good job educating me from a young age, so that I would understand those principles too.
Yeah, that's great. What was that like with his prison sentence and everything? How long did he serve? And I know there are issues with him getting proper medical care and being moved around the country, I believe. What was that experience like?
Well, he was in and out of prison several times. The first time was only 6 months, or I think he only served 4.5, 6 month sentence. It was a misdemeanor the first time. The next time he got, I think, 3 years. But then every time he got out, they would claim he violated his parole or his probation,
Mm.
and so he was going in and out of jail for a while. Then he was finished with that, and then the last time he got convicted of tax evasion, he ended up getting like a 13-year sentence. And by the time he got the sentence, he was in his mid to late 70s. So he wasn't going to get released until he was about 90, or maybe it was 70 when he went in, or 70, I forget, 90, 92. But he died in prison at 87, so he still had a few years left to go. But, you know, when he was 80, when he turned 80, so for the first few years, he was in a prison camp. They call him a federal correction camp. And the one he was in was only about an hour and a half drive from my house. And so I'd visit him a lot. I'd take my kids there. But when he got to be 80, they said, oh, you're too old. You need to be in a facility that has better medical care. So they transferred him to Indiana. Then they transferred him to Houston. But basically, he got no medical care at all because he ended up getting a skin cancer. And they didn't treat it, diagnose it. So it ended up, you know, spreading, and he died of lung cancer about 3 months after they gave him 4 months to live. But, you know, during those 3 months, we were, you know, trying to get the Bureau of Prisons and the government to let him out, just compassionate release, so he could die, you know, with his family. But they wouldn't let him out. And in fact, I remember when we were in the hospital room where he died, I got another call about how the paperwork was working through the system. I said, don't bother. He's going to be dead here in, you know, in an hour, because they took he was breathing through a tube.
Yeah, that's
But
terrible.
the worst part about it was he was shackled to his bed with an armed guard in his room, and he was barely conscious, and he was, you know, he was breathing out of this thing that they shoved down your lungs because his lungs didn't work anymore. And I'm sure he was conscious. You know, I could hold his hand and I could talk to him, but I'm sure he felt the pain of that handcuff on his ankle, and they wouldn't remove it. You know, and the armed guard, well, you know, that's the rules. He has to be handcuffed. I'm like, but he can't move. He can't leave the bed. He couldn't even leave the bed to go to the bathroom, right? He was hooked up to these things so he could, you know, pee without, you know, lying. So, but they still have him handcuffed. That's how ridiculous the government bureaucracy is. But they basically killed him too, because he was in good health when he went in. I mean, he had some cataracts. He was like blinding in one eye. But like his last months in prison were so bad because there's a phone system that you would use to make outgoing phone calls at prison. It was inexpensive. You know, they really stick it to the family members of the prisoners, because even though they had, like, you know, cheap phones and internet back then, you couldn't really use it without going through these government systems. We're a private system, but you know, they really gouge everybody because you don't have any choice. And the government gives out these contracts to their buddies. So they're ripping off the families of the inmates. But my father's voice was changing because of his cancer. And so for like the last, you know, month or two, he couldn't even make any calls because the voice recognition system didn't recognize him. And so, you know, we couldn't even talk to him. So it was just really bad. But I mean, it just, you know, the government is really heartless and criminal because they kept him in jail just, you know, as a political prisoner to send a message to other people. Hey, you better pay your taxes because, you know, you're going to end up in jail like Schiff.
So you mentioned tax evasion. How did he view it? How, you know, what was his justification?
For what? For not paying taxes?
Yeah. Because he had an argument, right? That he didn't believe
you know,
they passed it constitutionally or something to that effect.
Yeah. Well, you know, I put up on my YouTube channel, I put up some of my father's videos. I put up recently one. He explains in front of a fire. It's like a 2-hour discussion, and he's talking about it. We have a website called schiffbooks.com, and I've been selling my father's book, The Federal Mafia. So you can get a copy of that. I autograph it. We sell the Kingdom of Malts there too, which is what you got. But you can read and really understand my father's perspective, you know, and why he believed. And you know, most people I've talked to, especially even judges, lawyers, they say your father's right. They agree with him, right? So it's not like he was even wrong. It's the government that's wrong. It's the courts that are wrong. But, you know, they couldn't afford to allow him to be right. So they tried to discredit him by putting him in jail. But just like, you know, Galileo, you know, he went to jail because he said the earth orbited the sun. He obviously wasn't wrong, but, you know, the church didn't want anybody to know that. So they put him in jail to discredit him. So he must be wrong. So he's in jail. So, you know, and that's what they did with my dad. You know, he wasn't, you know, smart as Galileo, but it was just, you know, it's the same principle, how governments put people in jail to kind of prove a point. and and to scare people. But one of the books that I wrote with my brother, How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes, was based on a book my dad wrote and that we got a kick out of as a kid, How an Economy Grows and Why It Doesn't. So, there's a lot of influence. And, my dad, my dad had a great sense of humor. I think, I got some of that. I mean, he was a good talker, he did, so I think I inherited, I don't know if I'm as good as my father was. Because he used to tell my brother, and I used to make up fantastic stories. I don't have the imagination that he had. He would just on the just on the cuff would tell us these intricate stories. And they were almost like chapters, because every time we were around, we'd tell us more of the story, and so the story was like always ongoing and evolving. And he never knew how it was going to end because he made up these stories, as he went along. So he was always interested to find out.
That's a lost art.
Yeah, he would be like, how does it end? He goes, I don't know. I'm interested to find out, because he didn't know how it was going to end, because he hadn't made it up yet.
That's great. That's great. So kind of shifting to you a little bit more, obviously in the 2000s, as people can see in our films, you were out there predicting the housing crash far before anybody else, really. Before that, before you were going on the news talking about that, what was your career like leading up to that point? How did you get to the point where you were able to predict that stuff and have the business to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a good head for economics, and thanks to my dad, I understood the problems. And, if you remember back then, when I started really going out on television and talking about it, gold was under $400 an ounce.
Right.
One of my predictions was that the consequence of all this is that the price of gold is going up, and here we are now over $3,100 an ounce, and it's going to keep going higher. Because the consequences are unfolding the way I believe they would. Now it's happening. I think in an elongated time frame. When we did the interviews for the bubble movies, I thought that a lot of the stuff that's going to happen would have happened by now, right? It just hasn't. But it's kind of ironic, because I was just thinking, just over the last couple of days, now we're doing this interview, how what's happening right now, very much reminds me of the year leading into the '08 financial crisis. Because back then we had a Republican president, second term, just like now, Trump's second term Republican. All the Republicans were saying how great it is and how great he is, and just, how his policies are great, and, blah, blah, blah. And yet we were on the verge of this major crisis, and they couldn't see it coming, even though it was obvious as far as I was concerned, focused on housing and the mortgage market. But people didn't appreciate how dependent the economy had become on home equity and home equity related spending and debt and stuff like that. And then so it crashed, and everybody was blindsided. And then we got Obama. But I think the same mistakes are being made by the Republicans who are cheerleading Trump. Trump's in many ways, his heart's in the right place on everything except crypto. Crypto, he's just completely bought and paid for shill. And I think that's a real blemish on his presidency. It will be, in the history books. But I think the biggest mistake that everybody's making, not just the Trump administration, but all the Republicans that are rallying around him, are the impact of these tariffs. And we're doing this, today is Liberation Day. We haven't actually gotten the Liberation news yet. That's later on. But Trump is of the opinion, and so are a lot of the people that are advising him, that the U.S. has been taken advantage of by the rest of the world. That somehow, by producing stuff for us to consume and loaning us the money to pay for it, they've been screwing us over. And that's got to end. And Trump's got it backwards. They're not screwing us over. They're subsidizing us. We're screwing them over. We got them to do our work, and they're not getting paid. We have record trade deficits, huge, over $1 trillion a year. And that means that the rest of the world has to produce over $1 trillion a year worth of stuff that they don't get to consume. Meanwhile, Americans get to consume over $1 trillion worth of stuff that we didn't have to make. And so what happens is we get to print a bunch of money and ship it to Asia and South America and Europe. And they send us back all kinds of stuff. And so we're really exporting our inflation, right? Money goes out and goods come in. So we got all these goods that we didn't have to produce, which, production is hard. You need factories, you need resources, infrastructure, workers. We get it all for nothing, right? And so because we don't have to build factories and deal with the pollution and all that stuff, we get to just have a service sector economy, right? And we don't have to save very much because we don't need to invest because service businesses aren't capital intensive. The capital intensive businesses are in China, right? So they're the ones that are saving to finance it. So we get all this stuff. We don't have to make it. Then foreigners take all the dollars that they earned selling us all this stuff that we didn't make, and they buy our bonds. They buy our stocks. So it pushes up the financial assets. So all the inflation gets redirected from Main Street to Wall Street. Now Americans are richer who have stocks and bonds, real estate. Now, if you don't have those assets, all you do is, you're getting bled dry because your high-paying job is now gone. So you got a low-paying service sector job. But what's keeping you going is all the money you could borrow on your credit card because interest rates are low and stuff like that. But there's a subset of Americans who are just enjoying everything. They get cheap goods and they're rich because they got stocks, right? And they have all that wealth. And the government benefits because, everybody buys the bonds. But what Trump doesn't get is if the tariffs accelerate the end of this process, which was going to end eventually, that's been one of my forecasts. I thought it would be a dollar crash that would bring it about. Maybe it's going to be the tariffs. But what happens is we erect all these tariffs. And according to Trump and Ludnick and these guys, the foreigners are going to pay the tariffs, that it's external revenue, that we have the External Revenue Service now. We're going to have all this government and the Chinese are going to pay for it, right? The Canadians are going to pay for it. The Mexicans are going to pay for it. No, they're not going to pay for any of it. It's just going to raise the price of imports. And as a result, we're not going to import as much because it's going to be too expensive. So prices will go up. Some people will pay the higher prices and the government will get the tariffs. Other people won't buy the goods and they'll just go without them. But so now fewer goods are coming in, but less money is going out, right? If we're not paying for the imports, the money stays here. So we have more paper here and less goods. Prices go way up. So the tariffs don't cause inflation by increasing prices. That's just what happens. They cause inflation by increasing the domestic money supply because more of our money stays here and less of the world's goods come here. So we're going to have much higher prices, much worse than what we had under Biden, especially when the tariffs produce a recession. I actually think we're already in a recession. I think we've been in one for a while, just like with the 2008 recession. It actually started at the end of 2007. And so we were in a recession all through 2008. They didn't call it till 2009. They went back and they revised the data. So they may go back and revise all the data from 2024 to show that we were already in a recession, which is why Trump won, right? We were in a lousy economy with high inflation, stagflation. But when we do go into an obvious recession, when the data confirms it, what's the Fed going to do? Well, they're going to cut rates, probably go back to QE. They're going to, throw gasoline on an already heating up inflation fire. So we're going to get higher prices and higher interest rates, long-term rates, despite the Fed. That's one of the reasons the Fed might do QE, because if foreigners aren't earning as much money selling goods to America, they don't have dollars to buy bonds in America, to buy stocks in America. And that's why already year to date, the U.S. stocks are down, but foreign stocks are on fire, right? Because they're not investing in our markets anymore. They're investing already started. European markets are the best performing markets on the year, and the dollar is now falling. It's lower than it was now than when Trump was elected. We had a big Trump bump in the dollar. The Russell 2000 is already technically in a bear market. It's down 20% from its peak in December because it had a big spike. Oh, Trump's going to make America great again. So people bought the Russell 2000, which is the most leveraged index to the U.S. economy, pure play U.S. And now it's the first one in a bear market. So the reason I think it reminds me of '08 is this is obvious to me that these tariffs are a huge problem, and they can't see it. that this is going to completely blow up, and it's going to give the Democrats a weapon because they're going to be able to blame it all on Trump, the inflation, the recession. You inherited this great economy from Biden, which is bullshit, but they'll say it. Inflation was coming down, and you screwed the whole thing up, and that's going to destroy the Republicans in the midterms. And so the Republicans are going to lose, I think, both houses of Congress in that election.
Yeah, I've been concerned for a long time that when the crash did come, that it would happen under a Republican because people think they're free market, even though their policies obviously through all these crashes have not been.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting, when the first film came out in 2019, a lot of people wondered like why were we talking about tariffs and during the Great Depression and why were we talking about the 1970s? And I do think the public is a lot more willing to hear those ideas now that they've had to deal with inflation these last few years. Since we've kind of progressed our conversation toward this time period, if somebody was like in their 60s or 70s going forward with the fact that stocks are so high and there's this tech bubble and the fact that bonds aren't safe because if inflation picks up that could be wiped out and the fact that like the last 10, 15 years we've really had this shift into US stocks and like you just mentioned it might be starting to shift back to the rest of the world. Like how would you recommend somebody in their 70s and 80s or sorry 60s and 70s protect their retirement going forward?
Yeah, well, I'm in there. I'm 62, so I'm in that group. Yeah, inflation is going to wipe out most retirees, unfortunately, so I think in a few years, certainly, I think that most people who are retired today will no longer be retired. They're going to have to go back to work, and I think a lot of people who are planning on retiring are going to have to postpone those plans. The only wild card here would be the AI and how quickly we can implement artificial intelligence in scale, and not just inside a computer, but in a robot, so that we can dramatically expand our intellectual and physical labor pool. So to the extent that we can mass produce low cost intelligent robots, yeah, I mean, maybe we can all retire after all. So it's kind of like a wild card, between how quickly we can make those investments. And again, the investments to do that are going to be very expensive. So, where's the money come from to do it, right? It's a big project. Yeah, there's a return on the other side of the investment, but you got to afford to make the investment. But I do think that you're going to see inflation wiping out a lot of purchasing power before AI can restore it. And capitalism can restore it. So yeah, people need to invest. Like again, I said, gold's at 3,000. It's been it's increased 10 times since I first started telling my clients to buy it, and then I started helping them buy it because I set up Shift Gold because I didn't want them to get ripped off when they bought it. And yeah, I mean, people have been buying gold from me, and they're doing better than the people that just bought stocks from me. I mean, yeah, I have some stocks that went up 10 times, but most of them didn't. But gold, all you have to do is buy gold, right? But even the gold stocks haven't done anywhere near as well as gold, which surprises me because I have more gold stocks than gold, and I should be a lot richer today, and I'm not. But I think I will be. I think those gold stocks, are going to go up, and people who are listening to this, should be buying them. I manage a gold fund, or I own the gold fund. It's managed by Adrian Day, the Euro Pacific Gold Fund. People can buy it. EPGIX is the no load symbol. But you can get information at my website at europac.com. But I mean, I think that's the best speculative play that out there. Forget about crypto crap. These gold mining stocks, they're the ones that can take you to the moon, I think. Definitely upside is much greater than the downside. Whereas I think in crypto, the downside is a lot more likely. But I help my clients invest in dividend paying foreign stocks, conservative stocks stocks that trade at low PEs, low price earnings, that have good dividend yields, 5, 6, 7, 8%. And those dividend yields, if I'm correct, those yields will go up as prices go up. So the yields provide an income stream that is in itself a hedge against inflation. And the assets will go up, because if you're a typical retiree and you're living off of a fixed income, you got a pension, you got an annuity, you got some bonds, you're going to get wiped out. So you really need to be in income producing stocks. You can't be in just, high PE stocks that pay no dividends. They're not going to be of any help to your retirement. But I think that if you, are of retirement age or nearing it, you should get a hold of my reps at Europe Pacific Asset Management, and we could talk to you about how we can help you build and manage a portfolio for you that I think will help you stay retired or retire, right, depending on where you are. But again, most Americans, once upon a time in America, married women didn't have to work. Now, most married women work. Well, once upon a time in America, you could afford to retire, right? That's going to change. People aren't going to be retired again unless we get the AI miracle.
Well, you mentioned Bitcoin, and this is another issue where you've really gone against the crowd. Some would say you're one of Bitcoin's biggest critics over the years. So why is it that you've been so steadfast in your belief about that? A lot of people like to point at how much it's gone up over the years. Why do you think it's not going to stand the test of time? And do you believe it's just part of the tech bubble and is just going to trade with that trade of tech crashing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the epitome of the bubble. And obviously, had I bought Bitcoin when we first sat down to do the interview, I'd be a lot richer, assuming I didn't sell, right? So there's a lot of assumptions there. But sure, yeah, I could be one of these crypto billionaires. I know quite a few of them. they live in my neighborhood. But yeah. I mean, I really screwed that up as far as I underestimated the gullibility of the public and Wall Street in particular to bite on this. I mean, I recognized all the things that people are talking about now when I first looked at it, but my original objection to it, and it was actually had more value back then, because at least back then I saw the value for criminals in the dark web. You could use it to buy stuff that was illegal and you didn't want to be tracked. And, you could circumvent a lot of the AML and KYC that was there as a result of the Patriot Act, which, we got from the aftermath of 9/11. So I saw there was some, potential demand for it. But, I also thought it would be very volatile and it could drop. And I didn't think criminals would care. Hey, I bought some Bitcoin and I lost 30%. But, it's like laundering money. You got to pay somebody to launder your money. But the reason I didn't see like real potential in it was because I was told initially, one of the questions I asked, I said, well, can somebody else do this? I mean, is there something proprietary about Bitcoin, or can there be more cryptos? And they said, no, it's totally open source. Anybody can copy it. So I said, so there could be an unlimited number of these things. They said, yes. I said, well, then, it's going to have a lot of competition. And I was right about that. There's tens of thousands of these things. Plus, then there's millions of meme coins now. And I mean, it's just so saturated. Yet the market absorbed it. I did not see that there'd be enough demand to accommodate that supply. I certainly didn't see Wall Street getting in on it, but they got suckered in on it. I mean, they came up with all these ETFs, but Wall Street will sell anything if they can make money off it. I mean, they don't give a shit. They don't care how much their customers lose. So they saw something, they got convinced. And so, Wall Street joined the party. And then the industry got so big and they made so much money selling crap to the public, right? Because they create these tokens get created for nothing. You create no value and you get rich, right? I mean, that's, And so you had all these people, and what did they do with the money? They paid off the politicians to get all these politicians talking how great Bitcoin is. Oh, we need a Bitcoin reserve. Let's have the government buy Bitcoin, which is, again, very ironic that now Bitcoin is dependent on the government. They need a government bailout for this Ponzi to keep going, right? We need government to put the taxpayer money in because we've run out of fools willing to pay these high prices. So yes, I mean, this is a much bigger bubble than, you know, anything I could have imagined back in 2010, 11 when I first heard about the thing. And yes, I've been critical about it the whole time because I don't think it's money, because I don't think it has the most important qualification of money, which is the intrinsic value. Money has to be a commodity. It has to be a good. It's just a good that's more liquid and easier to exchange than other goods. It's money is the most liquid of commodities. So like when you work, if someone pays you for your work, you give them labor which has value. They're supposed to give you something that has value. Well, they give you gold because gold has value. Gold's a metal. It's a precious metal. It has all kinds of uses. If I'm exchanging, if I have a product, if I'm a butcher and you're a candlestick maker, and I want to buy some of your candles, right? I can give you meat, but maybe you're a vegetarian. You don't want my meat. But if I have some gold, you'll take that, right? Because it's real. It's got value. And even if you're not a jeweler and you don't need the gold, all right, well, you could go to the baker and buy some bread. And if he doesn't want your candlesticks, he'll take the gold, right? So gold is better money than the bread, which could go stale, right? The candles that could break, or a cow. I mean, again, the meat will spoil, right? So gold stays there. Gold doesn't change. Gold's great money, but Bitcoin, copied a lot of the qualities that gold had that made it better money than cattle and candles and bread. But it doesn't have the most important one, and that Bitcoin itself is nothing. So as long as people want to buy it, though, it'll have a price, and that's what everybody confuses price with value. And they see that Bitcoin's price has gone way up, and they say, see, it's a better store of value than gold. Gold's only got up 10x, and Bitcoin's got up a million x. But that doesn't mean it's stored any value. I can melt my gold down, and I can make something out of it. I can't make anything out of the Bitcoin. Price went up, but price can come crashing down, right? Because, price is what you pay. This is a Warren Buffett, but value is what you get. You can buy Bitcoin right now and pay $85,000. That's the price you pay, but you get nothing of real value. But as long as people are willing to pay up for nothing, it can go. But eventually the whole thing collapses. And the fact that it's taken so long, that's why, people just, think I don't know what I'm talking about. But it was the same thing with the housing bubble, only this has taken longer. I mean, I was talking about housing prices coming down years before they came down. But every time they went up, people would laugh at me. You told me not to buy a year ago. Look how much it's gone up. Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, right? So the Bitcoin bubble's just gone on longer. But it's going to meet the same fate. It's going to collapse. And I think the fact that now it's the government, this is the end of it, right? We're just, if Trump hadn't won, Bitcoin would already be, well under half. I think it'd be under 20,000 by now if Trump had lost this election. Because the only thing keeping it up is the specter of a strategic reserve and that madman Michael Saylor. But one of the reasons he's able to con so many people into loaning him money to buy Bitcoin is because they think that the Trump administration is going to buy it. So it's just a gigantic now government-fueled pyramid, Ponzi. And, unfortunately, people are going to lose a lot of money. Some people made a lot of money already. But I think worse than the people are losing money, it's the malinvestment. I mean, look at the president's kids. Look at his, the first sons, Eric and Don Jr. It's all crypto. Their whole business is now crypto. But all this is a waste of resources. Trump wants us to build factories. Well, how are we going to build factories if we're taking our capital and creating tokens and meme coins, all kinds of nonsense? There's zero value added on all the whole crypto industry. It just transfers money from one person to another. It's like a giant casino. And the more resources we squander on it, the poorer we are as a nation.
Our documentaries don't really take a position on Bitcoin or gold. They're really trying to give people the education about the history to make their own decisions. And so I kind of looked at it as something where at least Bitcoin and gold people can come together and in their hatred of the Fed, right?
We have a common enemy, I guess, although now the Bitcoin guys have gotten in bed with the enemy because they love the government now. The government's their best friend because they need the government to buy Bitcoin.
That always happens in the end, doesn't it? But when I first started the documentary, I really saw it as bridging the gap between Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, because you had the Tea Party that was frustrated with the stimulus, or at least Obama's stimulus, and then you had Occupy Wall Street frustrated with the bank bailouts. And I think our films do a great job of like showing those people that they have common ground and they have something you can unite on. You're one of the people that went to Occupy Wall Street. I walked through it because I was filming my the composer on our films, his band, The Color Pharmacy, was playing in New York, and I was on the road with them doing video, and so I got to go to Occupy Wall Street. But yours got a little more attention. Can you talk about your experience there?
Yeah, it's probably one of the better things I've done as far as the impact that it's made, I think, on people. But I came down there with Reason Magazine. My brother came down there with me. He had a sign, and the sign was, I'm the 1%, let's talk. And so I kind of like heard their grievances and, tried to address them, knowing that I was speaking not just to 50 or 100 people that were around me in the park, but I knew people were going to watch it, right? And so I was more trying to educate the people watching than the people that were around me. But I was still trying to educate them too. But they were generally very stubborn. So I don't know that I was making any converts, in the park. But I know I made a lot back at home, because I've never got more emails about anything than that. And it still has a life. I mean, people are still watching it today. I put it up on my website maybe 5 or 6, 7 years after, and I got another 5 million views. But the original one, the internet was cracking. The sites were going down. A lot of people were watching it, and they were listening. It was 2 hours. People were actually listening to it. But a lot of people have told me that, I was very much a socialist, liberal, whatever. My wife hates it when I call them liberals, because they're not. They're not like classic liberals. They're fascists, or corporatist, statists, what do you call them, socialists. But a lot of people who believed in the big government lie watched that, and that was either convinced them just all by itself, or got them to think about it enough to do some more research. And ultimately, it turned them around, turned their lives around, and they have a completely different perspective. And they email me and they thank me for that. And that's not just in America; it's all around the world. So it was well worth my time. I don't know how much business I got off of it, if I got any business off of it, but I think I helped educate a lot of people the way they need to be educated. Because they've been programmed or indoctrinated, when they're younger, by the government school systems and by the media, and so then I opened up their eyes.
Another time you reached a lot of people was when you went on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, but that's a much different situation, where this was a 2 hour thing where you had control of being able to at least express your opinion. What was it like meeting Jon and going on The Daily Show? And I know your experience was very edited, but
Well, no, not my first time on, when I was live with Jon Stewart, and there was no editing at all. It was just a live, he does his show, and he just, I don't know if I think they film it live and then they broadcast it. But that was great. I had a great time. It was a great interview. He was very complimentary to me. So it was really good. It was like, I don't know, a year or two later or something, that Samantha Bee invited me on to talk about the minimum wage. And so that was what got me into a lot of trouble, because they interviewed me for 4 hours, 4 hours to use like 1 minute, 2 minutes. And, I did a great job. I really wanted them to release the whole 4 hours. I wanted to put it online. So, because I would have challenged anybody to be in favor of the minimum wage. I'm sure all the people in the room were convinced that the minimum wage was the worst law ever passed as a result of this 4 hours. But they managed to take 4 hours out of it and slice it in a way to make me look like this really bad guy. And they focused on the fact that I talked about how the mentally retarded, right? And I used that word retarded. And I asked her, I said, I don't know what the politically correct word is for retarded. Can you tell me what it is so I could use it, right? So they don't show that. They just show me saying retarded. But And then I said, they're exempt from the minimum wage. It doesn't apply to them, which is a fact, right? And I try to explain, why is it that if you're mentally retarded, that you're exempt from the minimum wage? And I said, because if you had to pay them the minimum wage, nobody would hire them, because they're very slow, right? They, and they actually have these tests basically to determine what you can pay them. Like, if it takes them 10 times as long to do a job as somebody who's got a normal IQ, then you can pay them 10% of the minimum wage. I mean, that's kind of how it goes, right? So they recognize, right, that if you had to pay them the minimum wage, you would never pay them. And I talked to her about my aunt, who's passed away. She's my aunt by marriage, but she has Down syndrome. And she had a job below the minimum wage. But she loved the job. I mean, she had friends at work. She got a lot of self-esteem out of that job. And she didn't need any money, because even at 60, she was still living with her parents. She never moved out of the house. So the job was not more about, it wasn't about the money. It was about the personal satisfaction. And I try to explain that, if you put the minimum wage on her employer, he wouldn't hire her, and she would be out that satisfaction, right? So I try to explain all this stuff. But the way they showed it, it's like Peter Schiff wants people to hire mentally retarded people and pay them less than the minimum wage. Like that, like this is like I'm advocating this instead of like saying, no, it already happens. But I was using it to show why that even if you're not, have a mental problem, even if you have a normal IQ, but you don't have a lot of skills, that the higher the minimum wage goes, the more people you're going to put out of work. So I was just using them as an example, right? But they made it the focal point. And then, of course, I got attacked for saying like retarded, right? Even though I'm saying it now, I guess I could get attacked. But how dare you say that? I was like, but I didn't say it. They said it. They chose to air it. I said, can you tell me what the proper term is so I could use it? So they showed me saying that in a private conversation, right, in a room, to annoy people and say, look, see, he's insensitive. No, I wasn't. But the whole thing, and it's like some of the questions, like Samantha Bee would ask me a question, and then they would show an answer, but the answer they showed was to a totally different question. So they tried to piece it together, like making a Frankenstein's monster, to try to make me look as bad as possible. Now, the other guy, I think it was Barry Risholt. I talked to him because, they interviewed him to be pro minimum wage. And they basically gave him the questions in advance. They said, give me your answer. And they said, okay, if you don't like it, we'll do it again. We'll just keep doing it until you're happy with the take. So like the other guy, they tried to like show him in the best possible light. And me, 4 hours of interview to use 1 minute of footage. But the worst part about it was all these newspaper stories that came out the next day, like reporting on what I said on the Daily Show, like it was news. Like they don't realize, like, this is fiction. That's not what I said. This is a comedy show.
Yeah, right.
But they thought it was real news. They thought the Daily Show was the news. It's like, but I wanted to sue them because, but I ultimately did because I had emails. I said, oh, we're never going to make you look bad. We're trying to laugh at ourselves. We're not going to take you out of context. Of course, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
But, and they did that on a bigger scale, on an actual smaller scale, and how much editing they did. But, when the 60 Minutes interviewed me about my bank, although they didn't schedule the interview about my bank, they lied about what they were going to interview me about, because if they told me the truth, I wouldn't have done the interview. But they lied to entrap me into this interview. But then, they sliced and diced it to make me look bad. It took me over 2 years and a lawsuit that I won for defamation to get in discovery the unedited video, which I put up on my YouTube, and I put their edited version. But I never would have got the unedited version unless it was discovery in a lawsuit, because they refused to release it. But the crazy part about it too is I teased on my X account, hey, I've got the unedited video, I'm going to post it, right? They go to court and to try to get a restraining order to stop me from putting up the video of the unedited video. And they told the judge that the public doesn't have a right to see the inner workings of a broadcaster. So they have the right to see the interview the way they displayed it, in a very deceptive and fraudulent way, but they don't have a right to see what I actually said. So the judge basically almost threw it out. I wish he had let them continue, because he said, are you sure you want me to rule on this? Because it's going to be very embarrassing for your journalists if you force me to rule. And then they dropped it. So they had to pay my costs of the hearing, because I had to go into court for this temporary restraining order to prevent me from showing their own video. But I mean, that's what, but 60 Minutes, see, at least the Comedy Central, people are supposed to know that's comedy. People think 60 Minutes is real news. It's not. It's BS. It's propaganda. It's regurgitated government propaganda. They lie on 60 Minutes, right? So you see an interview on 60 Minutes, you have no idea what actually happened in that interview, right? They can make it into anything they want. Like this guy and they decided to do an investigation of me and my bank, right? But they started the investigation assuming I was guilty. Every fact they uncovered showed I was innocent. And I have all that evidence because I got it in discovery from them. So they do an investigation, assuming I'm guilty. They look for evidence to prove that I'm guilty. All the evidence shows I'm innocent. So what they do is they bury all that evidence. They don't report it. And then they fabricate evidence that they know is false. And they show that to the public to claim I'm guilty. That's how they work. It's total fake news. So.
Well, now that you've been proven innocent, like looking back, why do you think that happened to you? Like, why, do you think they were just trying to make an example out of you, or what do you think the reason it was for
Yeah,
being your
and look,
bank?
I got a civil rights lawsuit right now against a lot of these bad actors. I mean, they're trying to get it thrown out, sovereign immunity and statute of limitations and different stuff. But hopefully we go to court, because we go to court, I win. I mean, I already have all the evidence to win, and I'll get more that they're hiding if I get, discovery. And I'd love to depose some of these people. But look, I think they originally targeted me because of my political views, because of my father. Hey, this guy is anti-big government. He talks against the income tax. He talks against the AML laws and the Patriot Act. And he owns this bank. I'm sure he's using that bank to help people evade the taxes he doesn't like. And he's not complying with the anti-money laundering laws that he's criticizing. So let's investigate him. And, I'm okay with that. Okay, fine. Be suspicious of me. Maybe I am breaking the laws that I criticize. But to be honest, if I really was going to break some laws, the last thing I would do is publicly criticize them. Why would I want to call attention to myself if I was breaking the law, right? And I know that, and I know I'm going to be a target. So we were squeaky clean. I mean, we dotted every I, we crossed every T twice. So they investigated us and they found nothing. But the problem is they illegally leaked the investigation to the media before it was finished. And the media not only exposed this confidential investigation, but claimed I was guilty. But now the government is in a position where, they look pretty bad if nothing happens. I mean, this was this huge investigation involving 5 countries, biggest global tax evasion, money laundering investigation in the history of the world. And to come up completely empty, maybe they felt a lot of pressure to save face. So then they did more stuff, like they shut down my bank illegally. They put pressure on local regulators to make up a lie to shut it down, then pretend the bank was guilty of the crimes that they knew it didn't commit. I mean, it was a huge conspiracy on the part of all these governments to frame my bank so that they could save face and pretend that the innocent bank that they investigated for 2 years, or actually 5 years, was actually guilty. The thing is, they haven't even found a single customer who broke the law. We had like 10,000 customers. They've investigated these guys with a microscope. To my knowledge, not a single customer of my bank has been charged with a crime, let alone convicted of a crime. Not one. Of course, they didn't indict anybody that worked at the bank. They didn't indict the owners, the officers. They didn't indict me. They indicted nobody. I mean, I probably had the cleanest bank out there. And ironically, I probably had the most solvent bank. The pretense that the local regulator used for shutting down my bank was that it was insolvent. Well, the bank had no debt, made no loans, and had all of its deposits in cash or gold. And the deposits that were in gold were because the depositors asked to keep them in gold. So all the money was there. And in fact, in the like 1 year between the time the negative stories accusing me of running a money laundering operation through my bank broke on 60 Minutes and the New York Times, and the time the bank was illegally shut down for being insolvent, 70% of the customers of the deposits were withdrawn. I was a small bank. I had about $270 million. $200 million was withdrawn, and we sent it back. What bank in the world could withstand a run like that? Nobody. I had no deposit insurance because I was totally solvent. And making it worse. So it's been almost 3 years now. It's been 33 months. So it'll be 3 years, June 30th, since the government took over my bank, supposedly to protect the customers. Well, during those almost 3 years, not one penny has been returned to those customers. Not one penny. They could have gotten every penny back the day they put my bank into receivership. And there would have been a couple of million left over for me. Now, there's no money left over for me because they spent it all, right, on running the bank and paying the receiver and all whoever is paying. And the depositors have gotten nothing. One of them committed suicide over the financial stress. He wrote it in his suicide note that it was the bank. That's why he did it. But to the depositors of the collateral damage in the government's PR campaign to, claim a fake victory. Right, this today, if you talk to these J5, well, what's evidence of your success? Well, we got this bank shut down that was helping criminals launder money to evade taxes. Well, no, it wasn't. They got a perfectly innocent bank shut down specifically so they can pretend that it was doing all this stuff. So they have no real successes, just the fake success that they manufactured with the help of the media, with the help of the New York Times, with the help of The Age and 60 Minutes, which is why I'm suing those guys too. They're all part of the conspiracy. It's all on the internet. If you go to 9fraud.com, I've uploaded all these documents, all this stuff. It's all online, so anybody can go see it. 9fraud.com. 9 is the network I sued for defamation and won.
I haven't had to deal with anything to that extent. Obviously, I tried to cross all my T's and dot my I's with these documentaries as well. We did have the IRS come after us and tried to fine us $14,000 a couple times, but both times we won our appeals. But we did, when the first film came out in 2019, Facebook started suppressing my website. You couldn't post links to letusdisagree.com, the name of my production company, which was pretty ironic. So obviously we've seen a lot of censorship and stuff like that in recent years, but there seems to be a shift away from that. On the other hand, Joe Rogan has the biggest podcast in the world, and you got to be on his show a number of times. And I think that you had a significant impact on Joe, because before you were going on his show, I mean, the stuff he was saying wasn't anything close to what he's saying now as far as the market economy.
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, in fact, he even used to talk about me back in the days when he was having me on. They would talk about, oh, Peter Schiff, that. And, so there'd be times they'd talk about me when I wasn't even on the podcast. But I did it 4 times. But the last time I did it was, it was many, many years ago. And of course, he's way bigger now than he was back when I was going on. So I would love to go on a show again, but he seems to have lost interest in having me on, because I haven't, we've reached out to him a couple of times when I thought I was going to be in the area. He's out in Texas now. And, I haven't had any more invitations. So, it's his show. He can have on whoever he wants. But yeah, I would love to go back on. I mean, I'm still a fan of his, whether he has me on or not. I think he's a good guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Same thing with what's his name? I'd love to do Tucker Carlson's. I used to do a show all the time when he was on Fox. He hasn't invited me on once. I haven't even heard from him since he left to do his own thing. But I mean, now he's got a much better forum to interview me than he had when he was hosting Fox. Because when I was on his show on Fox, I'd get like 2 or 3 minutes to talk. That was it. But now he talks to people for an hour or two. I mean, I'd love to do an interview with Tucker, but I can't somehow, I don't know why he hasn't. I have so much good things to talk about. Not just my bank and how the government, because he loves those kind of topics, but the economy and all that stuff and what's going on.
Podcasting has really changed the way people receive information, and you're somebody on the forefront of that. Like, when did you start your podcast, and what made you see the potential of it? I mean, obviously it's kind of a natural fit for you.
Yeah, so I started mine. I was after I ran for Senate unsuccessfully in 2010. Uh, I decided to, well, I'll try to make a difference. I started to do a radio show every day, 2 hours a day, live talk radio. And I eventually stopped that because it was kind of too big a time commitment to have to always be there, and have to get guest hosts. Larry Elder was one of my better guest hosts. He came on a lot, but Tom Woods eventually he started guest hosting my podcast. Then he ended up doing his own. So I had a few, go-to guest hosts, but it was like a big commitment. And so then I just decided, it's not taking off enough. It wasn't getting big enough that it was worth my time. So I stopped doing it. But then when I did, I kind of transitioned into a podcast. And, I used to do interviews on my 2 hour show. Every day I would have an interview. So I'd do half-hour interview, and then I do an hour and a half of me talking and taking call-ins, right? So the podcast, I didn't do the interviews. I didn't take the call-ins. So it was just me talking. And that's a little bit different. Most people's who have a big podcast have guests. And so people tune in for the conversation, the interaction, which is also entertaining. But it also helps you build the audience because you get to draw on the fans of your guest. So you have a big guest that comes on your podcast. The people who are fans of that guest may never have known your podcast, but now they go and they learn about it. But mine is just me. I don't have any guests. So it's all just, I don't get the added publicity from bringing on big names, and so people just tune in to listen to what I have to say.
Well, it's been a great resource for me over the years. I guess before we wrap up, I just want to ask, like, when you're not trying to explain these ideas or looking at the markets or, following gold and silver and all these things, what's something that people don't know about you? What do you like to do in your free time when you're not trying to save the world?
Well, there's not that much because I'm always preoccupied. But no, I'm here in Puerto Rico, so I do relax quite a bit. Play some tennis once in a while, play some golf. I go to the beach. I walk on the beach. I go to the gym. I got two young kids here. Throw the football around with my son, and I just do a lot of things. We got school events. Usually when you're in your 60s, your kids are grown. They're out. I have one older son who's not even that old, but he's graduating in about 3 weeks from college. So he wants to go out to San Francisco and work in AI. So he's headed out there. So, but yeah, we're building a boat, so I'm going to be able to spend a lot more time on the water. When I really enjoy the water. I used to have a sailboat that I sailed when I was in California, and I moved in. I had one in Connecticut, on the Long Island Sound. So I sailed. But this one is gonna be similar experience to sailing, except I don't have to sail it because it's electric powered, and it's mainly powered by the sun.
That's awesome.
And it's much larger than the boats I had before, and I'm going to have a crew on it. So I'm not going to be doing the work myself, but I'm going to be able to spend a lot of time here in the Caribbean. We're going to take the boat up into New England and spend some time, up there. So I'll be able to relax a lot more. Probably do some podcasting from the boat too. I'll be paying Elon Musk quite a bit of money for that Starlink. They really nail you when you get a boat. It's a lot of money they know because they can see that you're moving, right? So they know they know you're on a boat, so they really charge you.
When I was in Boy Scouts, we actually went on a sailboat. We slept on the boat and everything for a week down in the Florida Keys. And then it was called Venture Crew. It was like co-ed Boy Scouts for like college age kids. And we went to the Bahamas for a week on a sailboat. So yeah, I love sailing. That's awesome. My last question for you is, regardless of investing or anything like that, if you could go anywhere in the world just for an adventure to travel right now, if you could just jump on a plane and go somewhere, where would you go?
Well, it's interesting that you ask because we were just thinking about what to do in July. We have a busy May and June, but I've never been to Japan, so we may go out there for a couple of weeks in the middle of July. And it's a country that one of the countries I've just never been to, and I hear so many good things about it. And while the yen is still relatively low, maybe it'll change by July if the dollar really tanks here. But Yeah, so we might go out there because it's a long flight. If we go from New York, it's a 14-hour flight. So it's going to be quite a trip.
Do you have a rough idea how many countries you've been to?
No, I've been to a lot of countries. But I don't know I haven't, written them down and counted them. But I've been, but there's plenty of countries I've never been to, so I haven't really I haven't been anywhere in Africa really. So I got to get over there. I mean, that's another place I haven't been to. Even Morocco or Egypt. I haven't been to Northern Africa. Haven't been to South Africa. There was one summer I was going to go when I was younger, my 20s, with a buddy of mine, and then he ended up backing out. I was going to go like Kenya, Tanzania. I was going to go a bunch of stuff, and then he couldn't go, and so then I didn't go because I didn't want to, have no who else to go with. So I didn't do it. But I had gotten all the shots. I got malaria, fever. So I was ready to go to Africa. But I haven't, kids might want to go on a safari.
Yeah, there you go.
We could also do that. I don't know maybe what that's like in July. Is it too hot to go into Africa? I know it's kind of warm in Japan too. Last summer, for the first time, I hadn't been to Turkey, so I was there. I was another place on my list. I haven't been to India.
Yeah, my mom was in South Africa last fall. She went down for like a week or two, and she liked it so much that she's already gone back for a month, and she's going back in the fall. So,
well, I had been to Poland actually a couple of times, but I never was in Gdansk. That was the first time I was there was last summer. We went to the shipyard where they're building the boat, and it was a beautiful town. So people haven't been to Gdansk, they should go. So nobody really talks about it, but it's really nice. Up on the Baltic coast of Poland.
My Poland story was back in 2013. I actually went there to speak at the Warsaw School of Economics. The Mises Institute of Poland did an event, and so I actually showed some clips from our interviews and spoke there. I got in town on a Sunday. I took a train by myself from Berlin, and I didn't speak the language. It was a Sunday. I hadn't been able to convert currency or anything. And when the time came to get off the train stop in Warsaw, we stopped at a train stop, and I just assumed that, the trains run on time there, as they say. And I got off the train, and I was supposed to meet a local that I was going to be staying with. And so, we didn't have cell phones. I was like using a computer with Wi-Fi and messaging him, and he's like, I'm here, you're not, I don't understand the problem. And it took me a long time to figure out what had actually happened. I ended up, I was like 2 miles from downtown. I carried all my camera gear and walked 2 miles to a hostel, was finally able to find a place to stay. But later on that trip, I did events in Lithuania with the Lithuania Free Market Institute and in Tallinn, Estonia. But when I was in Estonia, I interviewed their prime minister and their finance minister and their social minister. And we were in actual buildings like from the USSR, but they couldn't see the problem with having a central bank manipulating interest rate and setting that price. Like it was a fascinating experience for sure.
Did you go to Krakow?
I didn't.
Krakow's a beautiful city. And I think it's nicer than Prague. It's a lot, they're close. A lot of people go to Prague, and they don't go to Krakow. They don't experience that. But I went there for the first time I was in Poland, and I've got ancestral roots in Poland, right? So that's, because my grandparents are all from Eastern Europe. But I went to a conference there too. It was in like Chinincia, I forget the way. It was like a little town somewhere. But I went there for an economic conference. That's what brought me there.
Nice.
Can't remember the name of it, but it was like an Austrian free market kind of conference.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense that they'd be more receptive about that.
Well, because they had lived all those years under communism, so they know how bad it is.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on, Peter. I really appreciate you taking so much time to talk about some things that you don't normally talk about.
All right, Jimmy, and thanks. Good luck. Good luck with part 2 and part 3 of the bubble film.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm sure I'll see you at a screening one of these days.
For your film, it's taken so long for the air to come out that it's actually given you enough time to come up with the sequels.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But yeah, thanks again for being in the films and coming on the podcast. I appreciate it, and have a great day.
Take care.